with Mr. Lamada. He will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing story time with Mr. Lamada. We will be starting soon. Oh, story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh, he brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't leave lonely, won't you start all the reading? I just can't wait to be hearing.
Good morning and welcome to Story Time. Thank you for joining me. Happy Monday to you, wherever you're joining us from today. I'm glad you're here with me. Thank you for being here. We have a great book to read together, and this one is called The Wedding Portrait. It is written and illustrated by Innosanto Nagara. Yes, the award-winning Innosanto Nagara. A beautiful book, an amazing book. Lots to learn from this one today. Thank you for joining me and welcome to Story Time. Wherever you're joining us from, I hope you are well. I hope your loved ones are okay too, and I hope that you enjoy our time together. And yes, indeed, we learn and teach each other in this time. Thank you so much for being here. Good morning to you and welcome. It is cloudy out here in Oakland. I don't know how it is where you are, and I know if you're in the Northwest right now, Pacific Northwest, it is pretty hot. So we're wishing you all the best in trying to stay cool, and hopefully that there are spaces that have been created that you can go to and be cool for the day. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish you well. Thank you for being here. And of course, if you know about a place, please do direct those people in your neighborhood, people that you know, to go to certain places where they can get help during this heat wave that is going on in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to Story Time, a wonderful book to read, and yes, teaching us how do we show up in our communities, how can we be proactive citizens. Definitely the book for us today. And you know, when it's Innosanto Nagara, we're in for a treat. And we're reading this one with permission of 7 Stories Press. Thank you so much for joining us, and a big thank you to them for allowing us to share such great material here on Story Time. Good morning to you and welcome. Let us see who is with us this morning. Good morning to you, Amanda, Wes, Sarah, and Nathan. And you're saying it is hot and storm and cloudy. Oh, wow, in Illinois. Well, I hope you're well. I'm glad you're here with us. Please do stay comfortable where you are. I hope you're in a comfortable space, and definitely thinking about you at this time of the year. Hot, stormy cloud. All right. So, well, thank you so much for joining in and sharing that update with us. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Sarah and Nathan, for sharing that piece. Good morning to you. Good morning to you, Marietta. How are you doing today? With Henry out in Harvard, and he's saying very hot Harvard, Massachusetts. Just got back from camp and ready for a story. Well, welcome. I hope it is a relaxing place for you today. I hope you enjoy the time together. And you say we're wishing everyone well this week. Absolutely. Such a wonderful message, such an important message. Reminder, Marietta and Henry going out right there. It is very important that we think of everybody, and definitely wishing everybody well today. Thank you so much for joining in. Good morning to you in Harvard, Henry and Marietta. Good morning to you. Hopefully you're able to stay cool as well. Thank you. And right here close by in San Leandro, Abraham is at gymnastics today. Well, we miss you, Abraham, and hopefully you can catch us later on. Happy Monday to everybody coming in from Terry Kasweka. Thank you for joining us. Good morning to you, Terry. I hope you're ready for this wonderful book that we have to read together today. Tori Gamble, how are you doing in Bothell, Washington? And they say it may get up to 112 degrees today. Yikes indeed. Oh my goodness. Well, Tori, we're wishing you well out there. Liana, we're wishing you well. I know I've seen friends putting out, like temporary those kid poos in the backyard and trying to use those to cool down. So if you're able, if you have a space, but also I just hope that you have spaces that can be adjusted for the heat. Thank you so much for joining in, and I hope there is a space near you that also can provide that. Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for joining in. Crazy times, hot weather, people cannot go in certain spaces because of COVID, and then we have to deal with that as well. So definitely thinking about you, everybody out there. Thank you so much for sharing. All the best to you in Barthor, Tori Gamble, and Liana. Thank you for joining us today and sharing that information. Happy Monday, everyone, from hot Seattle. Baby Bia, Marlon, Nate, and Amanda. Thank you so much. Baby Bia, Marlon, Nate, and Amanda. Thank you so much for joining us and saying excited to see all watching today. Well, thank you so much. Absolutely. It's always a bright spot, isn't it? Seeing all the lovely people here in this wonderful community. And we have a great book to boot too, The Wedding Portrait. Definitely one to stick around for. Thank you so much for joining in and wishing you well. Nate, Marlon, thank you for joining us today. Welcome, and we wish you all the best. Please do stay cool where you are. Thank you for joining in. Good morning to you, Sam Black, Iris, and Zala out in England. Thank you so much for joining in. Good evening to you, or is it good afternoon to you out there? Thank you so much for joining in today. Good morning and welcome to Story Time. Jade and Ava Scarlett, how are you doing? Also in England, thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning to you and welcome to Story Time. All right, and let me know too, Ava Scarlett, if anybody else is joining in with you. I know you've had cousins joining you, so I hope they're here today as well. But thank you for joining in. Good morning to you, Madalena Iron and Tudor. How are you doing out in San Francisco? Thank you so much for joining in. I was actually in San Francisco yesterday. Very cold it was indeed. I needed 2 layers of jackets. I remember now I've been better about being dressed right for San Francisco. It definitely gets cold, especially close to the beach. So thank you so much for joining in today. Good morning to you, Madalena, Ian, and Tudor. How are you doing out in Long Beach? Thank you so much for joining in. Rocco, Clay, and Chriselle, how are you today? Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. I hope Long Beach is not too hot. Thank you for being here. Oh my goodness. Blessings to you too, Miss Samia. How are you doing? Good to see you here. Samia, let me know before you move so we should link up. Thank you so much for joining in today. Glad to see you here. I hope you're well, and I hope Sophia is doing great too. Thank you so much for being here. Absolutely love it. Good morning to you, Ingrid, out in Patagonia, Argentina. Thank you so much for joining us today. Good morning to you, Ingrid. Loved hearing your stories on the weekend, and thank you so much for sharing and welcome. And I'm glad that I'm able to read to you today. Thank you for being here. Good morning to you one more time, Amanda. We have a third Amanda in the house. Oh my goodness, Amanda and Evan. Welcome back, Amanda. I definitely remember Evan too. And you say we're 30 minutes north of Seattle, Washington, and it is definitely hot out there. Well, please, we wish you the best, and we wish you all that, like the cooling can begin to come soon. So thank you so much for joining us out from near Seattle. Thank you so much for joining us, Evan and Amanda, the third Amanda. Thank you so much for joining in. Oh, awesome. Love it. Ingrid, my family is great. Even my 2 family members that had tested positive for COVID are doing very well. Thank you for asking. I've been checking with them this morning as well, and they're doing very well. So thank goodness for that. Thank you so much for asking and for sharing that. And good morning to you. Yes, indeed, Miss Ingrid, one more time. Veronica Nunez and Benicio, how are you doing? Good to see you back. Welcome to Story Time. We'll be getting started with our book. Get comfortable. comfortable, get cozy. Well, if you can, please do try. And then this one is a little bit of a long book, so let us get ready to get started soon and get comfortable where you are. Sheba Chanda, how are you doing in Lusaka, Zambia? Thank you so much for joining in. And of course, Benjamin, hugs to you. Leon and Mateo, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us out in Oklahoma. Thank you so much for being here. We miss you out here in Oakland. Thank you. Tomaida Zulu, how are you doing today? Thank you for joining in. Remind me, Tomaida, who else is joining in with you today out in Zambia? Thank you so much for joining us. All right, we're going to get started with our story. Are you ready? Thank you so much for joining in. Special mention to you, Marlin. Thank you for joining us today. And of course, Nate. All right, here we go. The Wedding Portrait. This one is written and illustrated by, of course, the award-winning author of A is for Activist and My Night at the Planetarium, Innosanto Nagara. And this one, the full title is The Wedding Portrait, the Story of a Photograph, and Why Sometimes We Break the Rules. Is there ever a good time to break the rules? Well, let us find out from our book today. Let me just take off the sleeve so I can hold it properly. There we go. The Wedding Portrait, the Story of a Photograph, and Why Sometimes We Break the Rules by Innosanto Nagara. And of course, we're reading this one with permission of 7 Stories Press. Thank you for joining us. Here we go. When kids visit our house, they often ask about a particular photo that hangs on the wall. It's actually a cutout from the newspaper, but we put it in a frame and hang it up with the family photos. It's a wedding portrait, a picture of 2 people dressed up for a wedding and kissing. Those 2 people are Mama and I, and you will notice that Innosanto Nagara calls his wife Mama throughout the story. It is Mama and I when we got married. But as you can see, there is something different about this wedding portrait. What is different about it? Why is it special? But before I tell you about the portrait, I want to say something about breaking the rules. We usually follow the rules, but sometimes when you see something wrong, more wrong than breaking the rules, and by breaking the rules you could stop it, you may decide that you should break the rules. You know about segregation, right? That was when, in some parts of the United States, there were laws against Black people. Black families were not allowed to live in white neighborhoods. Black children had to go to separate schools and drink from separate water fountains. And when you got on the bus, if you were Black, you had to sit in the back. Those were the rules. That was the law. But those laws were racist. Those rules were wrong. Absolutely. Some people decided to do something about it. Black activists would get on a bus and refuse to sit in the back. One of the first to do this was Claudette Colvin, who was just 15 years old at the time. The bus driver yelled at her, "Move to the back!" But she ignored him. The driver called the police, and the policemen yelled at her too. "Move to the back of the bus or else we will arrest you." And guess what? She ignored them too. The police arrested her. But then other people came and sat in the front of the bus and refused to move. This happened over and over. Rosa Parks got on a bus and refused to move. The newspapers heard this was happening and came and took pictures. People from all over the country saw the pictures in the newspaper, and more came. And more came. Some marched, some protested. Others got on buses and refused to move to the back. And guess what? In the end, the laws were changed. This is called civil disobedience. That is one way to get the rules, to get justice. People have been using civil disobedience to fight for freedom for a long time. For instance, the British Empire colonized India for hundreds of years. They stole their resources. They treated their people very badly. If anyone complained, they threw them in jail. And when people rebelled, the British used their army and guns to stop them. This was not good. What did the people do? So the people said, "Sorry, British Empire, but it's time for you to go home. And until you go, we won't be cooperating with you anymore." The play date was over. The British didn't want to go home and tried to force the Indian people to keep following their rules. But the Indian people stuck to their promise. When the British told them they couldn't make their own clothes, they made their own clothes anyway. When the British tried to get them to pay taxes, they ignored them. The British even tried to tell them they couldn't make their own salt from the sea. So thousands of people marched to the sea to make salt. Some of the leaders were arrested, but others took their place and did it again and again and again. Over 80,000 people were arrested for making salt. They didn't win right away, but guess what? In the end, the British had to go home. And that's very important right there. They didn't win right away, eventually. In Colombia, there is a nation of indigenous people who are called the Ua. If you're indigenous to a place, that means you and your ancestors have been there for a long, long time, thousands of years, basically forever. The Ua are also called the thinking people. Their homeland is known as Kajka or Kera Chikara and includes the headwaters of the Orinoco River. It is a beautiful place. But their land is also a place where oil companies want to drill for oil. The Ua people knew that oil drilling only brings violence and environmental destruction. So they said, "No, thank you." But the oil companies ignored them and came anyway. So the Ua people decided to go to the place where the company was going to drill for oil and set up camp. They blocked the road into the camp to keep their oil company trucks from coming in. This is called a blockade. Another way to get justice. People from all over the world heard about the blockade, and many went to the company's offices to protest along with the Ua people. This is called solidarity. They also called for people to stop buying the company's oil so that the oil company wouldn't make any money. That is called a boycott. It took 10 years, but guess what? In the end, the oil company went home. Another boycott was one led by farm workers in Immokalee, Florida. These farm workers are the people who pick the tomatoes we eat. They work really hard in the hot sun and are not paid very much. In fact, some were being forced to work for no pay at all. This was a case of modern day slavery. So the farm workers began to organize. They asked restaurant and supermarket owners to sign an agreement to only buy tomatoes from farmers or from farms that treated their workers fairly. But the owners said, "No way, we don't care about the farm workers. We like our tomatoes cheap." A lot of us don't have a lot of money, so we like our stuff cheap too, don't we? But think about it. If someone offered you a cheap tomato, but it was cheap because it was picked by a kid just like you who had to work all day for no pay and wasn't allowed to go home, would you buy it anyway? Definitely something to think about. I didn't think so. And the Immokalee workers didn't think so either. So they said, let's boycott these restaurants and supermarkets that don't care. They also held marches and rallies to let people know about the boycott. At one point, they marched almost 250 miles, all the way to Orlando. People across the country stopped going to these restaurants and supermarkets. And guess what? In the end, the restaurants and supermarkets decided they had better care. There are many different kinds of civil disobedience and direct action. There is the sit-in, the lockdown, the sit-out, the slow down, the work to rue, the strike, the boycott, and the blockade. You can be a war tax resistor, a conscientious objector, a banner dropper, a tree sitter, a hunger striker, a plowsharer, or a whistleblower. And kids, I encourage you and your families to look up all those afterwards and see what they mean, okay? And people are always finding new and creative forms of civil disobedience. Black Lives Matter activists wanted to get rid of the Confederate flag. That's the flag of the people who wanted to keep slavery during the US Civil War. They lost the war and slavery was banned. But even though the flag is a symbol of racism, some state governments were still flying it. So Bree Newsom and her friend James Tyson decided to do something about it. They got up really early one morning and went to the government building where the flag was flying. While their friends helped as lookouts, Bree climbed up the flagpole and took down the flag. This is called direct action. The police came and made her come down. Then they arrested her. But by then, lots of people had seen Bree on TV taking down the flag. They joined in demanding that the flag come down. And guess what? Less than a month later, the flag was taken down for good. Now, I will bet all this is giving you some ideas, isn't it? Do you think some of the things that you do when you're not following the rules should be considered as civil disobedience? Do you think hiding under the bed to avoid taking a bath is a kind of sit-in? Is refusing to eat your dinner a kind of boycott? Well, maybe, maybe not. But I was supposed to be telling you about the wedding portrait. It all started because Mama and I don't like nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are huge, terrible, expensive bombs that are so deadly they can blow up a whole city. And after the bomb blows up the city, it leaves poisonous radiation everywhere that makes people sick. Nuclear bombs had only been used in one war, long before you were born. During World War II, the United States dropped 2 nuclear bombs, one on the city of Hiroshima and one on the city of Nagasaki in Japan. These were cities full of regular people, and many, many people died. And because of radiation, even more people got sick. The other countries wanted to have nuclear bombs. They figured it was if their neighbors had one and they didn't, then they got into a war they would lose. This became known as the arms race. Countries were racing to see who could make the most nuclear weapons the fastest. But regular people like us were against the arms race. We understood that if everyone had big deadly bombs and a war did start, then everyone would get bombed. And it would be terrible and sad, and there would be no happy ending. It's like if you hit someone because you don't like what they said, and then they hit you back harder, and you hit them back even harder. Nothing gets better, and everyone gets hurt. And when you do it with nuclear bombs, everyone dies. Who wants that? So people protested against nuclear bombs. Anti-nuclear activists would go to the places where the military was testing its new weapons and tried to get in the way so they couldn't do their tests. This is called a sit-in. Native American communities like the Western Shoshone people led these protests because it was their land that was being poisoned by the radiation from these nuclear tests. Many others came in solidarity. Meanwhile, Mama and I had decided that we wanted to get married. We had been living together for many years. We were in love, and we wanted our families and friends to join us in celebrating our love. We also thought it was important that we use the occasion to celebrate the values that brought us together. We had first met on a bus going to a protest, so we decided to take our wedding to a protest. People get all dressed up to look nice for a wedding. I was in a suit, and Mama was in a beautiful white wedding dress. All our friends who were part of the ceremony were also dressed nicely. Then we all marched together to a lab where the government made new weapons, and we stood in front of the gates. We were blocking the gates, so the guards came and told us we had to move. Instead, we knelt down, and just like in regular weddings, we kissed and everyone in the audience clapped. Even some of the guards had to smile. They still wanted us to stop blocking the gates though, so they gave us a final warning. If you don't move right away, we will arrest you. Do you think we moved? No, we refused to move, and they arrested us. About 100 people refused to move that day. We had to sit in the sun all afternoon. It was like a super long time. Mama's wedding dress was all dusty and dirty. But a reporter took a photo of us and published it in the newspaper. Lots of people read the newspaper and learned about what the government was doing. Our friends thought that this was the best wedding photo ever. So as a gift, they framed it and we hung it on our wall. And guess what? That is the story of the wedding portrait. Oh, and there's so much more to read in the back in the epilogue. Thank you so much for joining in Storytime today. I hope we learned something from that. Absolutely powerful book. Lots of great information for each one of us out there. The Wedding Portrait, a story of a photograph and why sometimes we break the rules. Thank you so much for joining in. And this one, of course, is written by the award-winning Innosanto Nagara. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were learning something from it. I certainly did. Always a reminder whenever I read this book, just the many things that we can do. How are you showing up in your community? How are you showing up for justice? Thank you so much for being here. And please put in the comments anything that you were learning or anything that you like to share. Love to hear from you. Thank you for being here. And we'll be back again tomorrow with another exciting story. And this one is Celebrating Individuality in Wings by Christopher Myers. So do join me for that one. Wings will be read tomorrow. Thank you for joining in today. And let us see who else was with us and got to enjoy that story. Thank you so much for joining in. I love it. Thank you. Amanda, absolutely say this book was awesome. Thank you so much for joining. An absolutely powerful book indeed. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Couldn't agree with you more. Thank you so much for joining in. And Amanda West, you're saying, what an incredible book with an important message. Sarah and Nathan were learning about nuclear bombs and the damage and destruction they caused just this morning. Amazing. Thank you so much for, I really appreciate all you adults there too that are there with our kids and exposing our children to all this information and all this great things so that we know our future is in great hands with our little ones learning so much right now. So thank you for sharing that and say they found this book even more timely. Well, thank you. Definitely in sync. Great minds. Thank you so much for joining in and sharing that and say thanks. Well, absolutely love it. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Amanda. And of course, thank you, Nathan, as well for sharing that. And Amanda Waltman as well said, awesome. Love it. Samia Karimi say, wow, what a powerful, touching book. Yes, indeed, it is a powerful one. Please find it at your local library. Find it where you get books. An absolutely beautiful book. Powerful, wonderful message in there for each one of us. Definitely something to think about. Oh, absolutely. Ola Olu, my brother, thank you so much for joining in. Powerful book, very informative story. You say, yes, indeed, absolutely. A great way for us to start the day. Oh, indeed, if it's the middle of the day, to snap as you're snacking, something to listen on and build on for the day. Absolutely love it. Marietta, thank you. You say, wow, just wow. Absolutely. A fantastic book for the kids. Well, indeed. Thank you so much for sharing. I absolutely appreciate that. And please, if you have any other recommendations of amazing books out there, please do send them my way. Do send the titles my way so we can see if we can get them on here. Chrissy Mitchell Adams, you say, oh, just you today. Well, thank you so much. We know Borden is away at school. So enjoying it. Thank you so much. I'm glad you were still able to join us though. And you say, what an incredible and important book. Thank you for sharing. Well, absolutely. Thank you. And Innosanto Nagara's Ace for Activists is one of Borden's favorites. Good to know. And also his latest one, which is All the Things Therefore, is also another very, very powerful book, very much in this style as well. So thank you for sharing that, and good to know that A is for Activist is Borden, one of Borden's favorites. Absolutely love it. Good morning to you too one more time, Ingrid, and say, I know that they're really tiny step, but talking about it and passing around the message is a start. Absolutely right. So we can share, we're exposing ourselves to these things and talking about them, and it's never too late, it's never too early to start the conversation with our little ones. Thank you so much for joining in today. I absolutely appreciate each and every one of you, and as you can see, this book is just a powerful book, and I'm glad that we were able to start the week with it. But we have another book tomorrow that is just as powerful, and this one will be Wings. This one definitely celebrating individuality and of course acceptance. So thank you so much for joining in. And also, how do we support, how do we show up for others? So Wings will be here tomorrow, and this one is written and illustrated by Christopher Myers. So please do join in for that one. But today, absolutely loving this book that we had, and also keeping you in mind in Seattle, Pacific Northwest, keeping you in mind today. I hope that you can all ride out the heat in a safe way, and of course, you and your loved ones. So thank you so much, keeping you in our thoughts today. Thank you so much for joining in, and absolutely love this time together. Appreciate each and every one of you. Thank you so much for joining in. Great to see some familiar faces back after a long time. Tomaida Zulu, appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Sheba Chanda, and of course Veronica Nunez and Benicio, absolutely appreciate you. And of course Evan and Amanda, how are you doing today? And you are also near Seattle, so thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you enjoyed that story. Please do join us tomorrow when we have Wings by Christopher Myers. Thank you for joining in. This has been Story Time for today. Absolutely appreciate each and every one of you. Hugs and love from me to you. I wish you a wonderful day. Please remember, simple ways, little ways that we can continue showing up in our neighborhoods, showing up for our communities, and making this world a wonderful place indeed. Thank you so much for being here. Have yourselves a lovely day. This has been Story Time. Much love. Bye-bye.
Read me all of your stories. Some with people who look like me, others very different from the way that I look and think. Read me all of your stories. Read me all of your stories. Some stories from far away, others right here in my neighborhood. Read me all of your stories. Read me all of your stories. Some with people who look like me, others very different from the way that I look and think. Read me all of your stories. Read me all of your stories. Some stories from far away, others right here in my neighborhood. Story time. Ooh. Story time. Story time with Mr. Lamada. He will be starting soon. Story time with Mr. Lamada, where all your dreams come true. Oh. He brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait to be hearing. Brings to life your favorite stories with a great big smile. You won't live lonely, won't you start all the reading? We just can't wait.